The story of the Gunnison Valley has been told for generations. It is always told from a new perspective, one that believes that they have won over the land. We will attempt to share the full story so you understand the big picture. However, we may have bitten off a little more than we can chew, but let us focus now, and we will express all of the voices that we have found contained in this land. We will do so chronologically, first with the Folsom people who settled here after the last ice age, to the Ute people, to Captain Gunnison and the railroad and all the gifts the white man had to bring. We will end with what we find ourselves surrounded by and what we believe the future of this valley holds. Listen with a grain of salt in your ears, for we do not know what we have not been taught. We are well aware there will be gaps in our perspectives, but the intention is to get you thinking about where you stand on this land. What story do you wish it to tell? To be upfront and honest with you, we are two white Coloradans blessed with the great privilege to sit back and try and connect the dots of a history that we feel many people do not understand. There is a moral to all stories. Where do we start? Like I said in the beginning with the Folsom people, the first to try and call this land hospitable. They looked out and saw that proud mountain with a little flat top. You know the one. And they decided that they could build something new up there. I am referring to W Mountain, of course. If you were to go up there and look around, archaeologists have exposed the homes of their ancient society. It is said that only 5% can be seen with the naked eye. The last remains hidden under the years of silt blown atop that hill. What can be found in the 5% is the inklings that people have been here for far longer than you think. If you decide to carbon date the relics found at this site, you will see that these people were here 13,000 years ago. They have found a great Folsom Point factory up there, something that was believed only to be found in New Mexico. But that fact has now been rewritten. I wonder what secrets of the world the W Mountain holds. We know why they chose this place to build this home. One can plainly see the first and last lights of day dance across the top of that hill. Using the sun, they found that they could stay warm up there despite the harsh winters. The valley floor was used as a place to freeze their meat. It is in this freezer that us modern peoples have decided to build our homes. These Folsom people ate a delicacy that we will never taste, the bison antiquus. This beast was far larger than any bison you have ever seen with your eyes. These brave people hunted them with these little things called Folsom points. They are little stone projectiles that they crafted from the art of breaking stone with bone. There are many secrets this site has yet to tell. Archaeologists estimate the buildings are only 5% uncovered. What does the rest of the 95% hide? What we have learned there so far pushes mankind's being here to a place almost beyond time. I can only imagine the rest of the story that will unwind. But the land we see now has been used and abused, but I am getting ahead of myself. There were other people who used to live in this land. I am referring to the Ute people. Many books that I found use the word forgotten in the title, a metaphor I do not want to go over your head. The historians of our time place these people in the valley in the 16th century, a mere 5 decades ago. However, knowing that the Folsom people were here after the last ice age, I feel as though that number is incorrect. Listening to Native Nations speakers today, you hear them refer to themselves as the original people of this land. I believe that there is much fact in those words, though archaeologists have not properly investigated it. One day, I would like to hear the true story of how these original people came to be the best stewards of this land that we have ever seen to date. There are the Paranuchis, or the elk people that flock to this valley to hunt elk in the summertime, a way in which people still interact with this valley to this very day. And there's the Tabgwash people, better known as the Uncompahgre people now. They came to this valley for all it had to offer, not just one thing. These people were labeled as savages by those who did the bookkeeping. Their way of living with the cycles of nature was beyond the understanding of the white man at the time. These original people had a way of being connected to the land and nurturing the systems in such a way that the land appeared to be the last remaining Eden to those who came to settle it. Forests were lush and game was plenty. The land flourished in these people's presence, which allowed them to flourish. They had come to understand how to use fire as a tool to steward the land, not as a natural disaster to be feared. Through the art of intentional burning, they built the great grasslands to provide a place for them to hunt great herds of bison. Fire was also used to clear dead growth of forests and restore the understory. This promoted biological diversity within the ecosystems and allowed for more bountiful harvests once the burn scars had healed. These people lived nomadically and within the seasons of the land. They did not understand this whole idea of owning the land. It was more like they were owned by the land. They followed the rules of nature that are plainly observable in the day-to-day and did what they could to make these natural cycles work for them. Of course that they were open to sharing the land, but they did not quite understand what the white man had planned. When the white man came, he romanticized this place as the last of the untouched wildland. Little did people like John Muir know that they were romanticizing a land that was stewarded by the people that they had labeled savages. We had stumbled into a place that was the last remaining Eden. What else would we do but take a bite of the land? It is no sin to eat an apple, right?
As a young girl growing up in Aspen, Colorado, the story I knew about the Gunnison Valley began here, with a man named John W. Gunnison. At the ripe age of 19, Gunnison became a teacher, but shortly after joined the West Point Military Academy, where he graduated June of 1837, second in his class. But his story really begins a year later when he joins the Corps of Topographical Engineers. As a relatively inexperienced lieutenant, Gunnison was promoted to captain on March 3, 1853. He was then selected to lead a search for the Pacific Railroad route along the Kansas-Nebraska border. The expedition took him through the Great Plains, over the Rocky Mountains, and finally into the Gunnison River Valley. On September 7th, the expedition first arrived in the Black Canyon. The party never traveled far downstream because of its formidable waters. However, this became the first official description of the Black. Gunnison eventually died, traveling west to Utah through what is present-day Montrose. His party was attacked by the Paiute tribe raids of Mormon settlements. Him and all his comrades were simply collateral damage. Gunnison's demise was not in vain for the white settlers in the West. His discovery of Gunnison eventually led to its establishment as a colony in 1874. Ranching really took off in the 1880s after the Meeker Massacre in 1879. Before I move on, I think it's important that we establish the history of the massacre in order to understand how Gunnison and many other Colorado settlements gained absolute power over the state. In May of 1878, the Northern Ute tribes in Colorado received Nathan Meeker as their new Indian agent. Meeker intended on Christianizing the Northern Utes and used them as farm labor, despite their nomadic lifestyle. The Utes' connection to their horses and the land was deeply valued in their culture. So in order to enforce his settler values, Meeker plowed the land they used for racing and forced them to give up their horses. The Utes saw this action as a threat to their culture and a brutal desecration of the land. Fearing Ute backlash, Meeker called for military protection, sparking a horrific chain of events. The four northern leaders of the Northern Ute tribes, Captain Douglas, Jack, Cullerow, and Johnson, caught word of the armed white man crossing the Yampa through their territory. In fear of being victims of yet another genocide on American soil, Captain Jack and Cullerow led the warriors to Milk Creek to ambush Meeker's base. 8 of Meeker's agency employees were killed, and Meeker's body was found with a spear in his mouth. The Utes intended this to symbolize the demise of Meeker's many lies. Overnight, Milk Creek turned into siege. When messengers were sent out into the night, the Buffalo soldiers arrived to help Meeker's White River Indian Agency conquer the Utes. After the battle, quote, negotiations led to the majority of northern Utes being forcefully transferred to Ouray Reservation in an undesirable location in Utah. In the final days of northern Ute presence in Colorado, a businessman named Otto Mears bribed the last remaining Ute men to sign a final treaty of removal. Today, Gunnison, Colorado Western University still uses this man's name on the side of one of their dormitories.
In order to personalize this tale of the Ute people a little more, I believe it is important to discuss Chief Ouray, or as his people called him, Chief Oulé. There are many things the white man took from this man. We could not even let him keep his name the way he wished. This is one of the few stories we have about the progression of the white man in this area. Ouray was a shepherd, born and raised in Taos. Upon his birth, the sky was full of shooting stars. The people took this as a sign that the man's life would bring some wishes to fruition. Born in Taos around 1833, he grew up speaking English and Spanish, for foreign people had already taken some of his people's land. He would not learn his tribe's language until he moved to Colorado to join his father, who had become the chief of the Tabequash people. It was here that he developed his reputation and eventually earned the title of chief, like his father. As the white man progressed across the Ute Nation's land, Chief Oulé became the spokesman for his people. He attempted to win the white man's trust and respect through patience, diplomacy, and the strength of his personality. But despite his peaceful efforts, the white man took advantage of him and his people. The more treaties that they made together, the more land the Ute Nation lost to the progression of the white man. Despite Chief Oulé's best attempts to convey the needs of his people, he was never understood. He had said, "We do not want to sell a foot of our land. That is the opinion of our people. The whites can go and take the land and come out again. We do not want them to build houses here." Chief Ouray. We are all well aware that this message was not heard. His people began to distrust him, and a few people of his tribe attempted to take his life. They placed the blame on Chief Oulé, not the heavy thumb of the white man. Despite all of this, the chief stood true to his name and his beliefs and attempted to peacefully find a way to entertain the white man's desires. Though he was unsuccessful, his story holds an ideal that can still be understood to this very day. We will be jumping into the future a little bit now, but first we must recognize the importance mining plays in the development of this valley. Many a miner came to these mountain ranges in the 1800s to find the promised land. Gold, silver, and coal, along with many other minerals, are to be found buried in these mountains. While the promise of wealth lured many of the settlers here, they ended up staying and developing the land for other uses, such as recreation and tourism. It is on these two principles that the town we live on stands on today. There's much history to be told in the mines of this land, but it is a history that we do not have time to discuss today, but we must acknowledge it. If you are interested, this is an opportunity for you to do your own mining and connect the dots a little more on your own time. The ski town now known as Crested Butte began when two blokes bought some land and opened a tea-bar. Their names were Dick Eflin and Fred Rice. In the early years, the resort struggled to stay open in the hard-to-reach corners of Colorado. But as technology progressed and new lifts were built on the mountain, it transformed into the resort that we know today. The resort was known in its early years for helping develop the mountain dance known as telemark skiing. This land inspires one to become intimate with it. That is a fact. It is at this resort that the writers of this story work, where time is exchanged for a little dime from the multi-million-dollar tourist industry. Let us bring you a little closer to the present moment. We are going to start to switch our language to the contemporary art of poetry. We wish to change the way in which you view the world and his story. So we will write it as poetry.
Momentum, pushed forward by spinning gears. Click, click, zoom. We ride, one says, with great vigor and excellent technique. We are the pioneers of dirt and rock tumbling beneath our wheels. It's the early 70s, and we, the Grubstake Gang, intend to take bikes where no man has gone before. We call our trusty steeds the Clunkers, 60 pounds plus of metal and pure badassery. And of course, no one's wearing a helmet. If anything, our new sport is for the loose and disorganized. We are the classic party animals just looking for something dumb to do. What we do is not for the faint of heart. In a blink of an eye, the madness vanished. Every decade, our bikes would improve. First, a mixture of chromium and molybdenum, making the thought of traveling uphill nearly impossible. Transformed by aluminum and carbon fiber, trails for miles cutting through deserts and mountains. The terrain only got crazier, and so did the people who rode them. Outsourced metals allowed the white man to fly. Hippies and tourists of all nature flocked to Crested Butte for epic winters and wild summers, throwing themselves through the valley's natural wonders.
I work for the neutered mountain. Lifts installed all but shy of the summit. $150, please. 1 day of lift rides on the most scenic couches in the world. Don't forget, take one picture only and fly down the mountain in your oil-based gear. Disregard the beauty of the land and discard your beer cans where one sees fit. It is not your job to maintain the land you interact on. That is what Vale has hired me for. Make sure the workers get underpaid in their lovely little mountain town. Let the rich keep getting richer in this vacation town.
Now I'd like to tell a story of a town drenched in hypocrisy, but I'll leave that to be decided by the observer. I mentioned before a very important ore called molybdenum. In 1977, a multinational mining corporation named Amex stumbled upon what was thought to be the third largest molybdenum deposit in the world, right in the heart of Mount Emmons, also known as Red Lady, Crested Butte's most prized environmental accomplishment. Today, the town of Crested Butte still celebrates this triumph over the mining industry in a pagan festival called Vinatoc. But before I get ahead of myself, it's important to note that around the same time, the sport of mountain biking was really taking off in this small mountain town. At this time, members of the Grubstake Gang were making clunkers for only $15. These bikes were made of chrome alloy, a combination of chromium and molybdenum, or sourced from the global south. Recreational activities such as skiing, biking, climbing, fishing, and hunting turned Crested Butte into a recreationally based economic power. Many mining companies attempted to extract this ore, but members of high country conservation advocates and the whole Crested Butte community have and will continue to fight for this mountain's preservation. Crested Butte has become a playground for the affluent people who would not hesitate to buy outdoor apparel that relies on the companies like Amex, who extract materials from faraway lands so as to keep the idea of environmental injustice out of sight and out of mind. So now I urge you to question the fairness of all of this. What is the lesser of two evils, if both mining and recreation are extractive practices? To what extent will you interact with this land's history?
Are you starting to remember your original mother? There is a way of life where we are connected to the land, and through this connection, a person can foster an intimate relationship with this land. Through this understanding, we can have a lifestyle that allows the land to flourish, not only for our pleasure, but for the benefit of the generations to come. It is not what you put on a land that makes a place home. It is how you interact with it. This art was created on an unethical device, projected to people occupying a stolen land.